bringing your artificial intelligence medical device, software as a medical device to the market. So today I'm going to be providing a brief summary because a question that I often get is how do you get an idea right down to market, start to finish? What are the important things? What are the documentation requirements, quality management system requirements, etc.? And that's what I'm going to be breaking down for you today. The overview I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to be talking about the regulatory frameworks, the pathway, and the most common questions I get. So first off is the question you really need to ask yourself, is your software even regulated as a medical device? Because there is a lot of products out there that are wellness products or fitness related, depending on the claims, that aren't necessarily medical devices and are not necessarily regulated. That's something that we need to determine first. Number two, a common mistake that I see, there's a lot of companies out there who think that they are software as a medical device, but they don't realize that there's a physical element to it as well. So a programmable electronic mechanical system. So for example, if there's a software out there that can detect COPD, they may have a data collection tool that somebody breathes into. That also forms a role as part of the software and effectively needs to be regulated and needs to be part of the quality management system. Number three, what does the regulatory pathway involve? What is the start to finish? What exactly do you need to do? What documentation is needed? And what does the process look like? And the fourth, the most important step that when I do, and every time I take on a new client and they've just created a new product, I always ask them, what is your intended use and what claims are you going to make? Because that will determine what market you should go to first. And number two, what risk classification your products will be. And consequently, what sort of clinical data you require based on that.
If I may, I'm going to interject here. If you go back
Sure.
to the previous slide, I want to share with the audience my perspective as a marketer. This is an excellent way to start a presentation for two reasons. One, if you were to say, hi, my name is Karandeep, and I blah, 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 and I blah, 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 that's very nice, but we don't care. I mean, we just want to know what you know. Second is, these are the questions I get most often, is most likely the questions that people on the call have, and they want to know. So as an extension, my main lesson, if you will, for clients last year was frequently asked questions is the most valuable content you can have on your site. This is what they want to know. They don't want to hear we blah, 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 our history, blah, blah, blah. That's nice. They want to know the frequently asked questions. So give them that answer. So thank you. And
thank you very much, John. That's something I completely agree with. Today I'm here to teach people, not here to talk about myself. And just like you said.
Right.
So number one is, what exactly are the regulatory frameworks then? So if we look at this table here, for the purpose of today, I'm going to be talking about the UK, EU, and USA, as they tend to be the biggest markets around the world. But of course, we're dealing with software right now. And another mistake that companies make, they don't realize that there's a cybersecurity element to it. We're not talking about traditional devices like pacemakers that maybe are not transmitting information. These devices are transmitting information over the internet, over databases, etc. And we need to make sure that the information is secure. So from the regulation point of view, when it just comes to medical devices, so in the UK, we have the Medicines and Medical Devices Act 2021. More importantly, we have the UK Medical Device Regulation 2002. Now, this causes a lot of confusion with the EU MDR. The UK MDR is more or less exactly the same as the previous EU Medical Device Directive. That is because the UK left the EU, Brexit occurred before the MDR transition occurred. So the UK has stuck with the old MDD regulation and renamed it the UK Medical Device Regulation. Within the EU, as many on this call will already know, Medical Device Regulation, which came into force the 26th of May, 2021. And of course, in the USA, we have the FDA. When it comes to cybersecurity, so within the UK, we have the GDPR, and within the EU, we have the GDPR. The UK GDPR is more or less a parallel copy of the EU GDPR, so they're more or less exactly the same. So there's nothing to worry about there. As far as I'm aware as well with the EU is they are proposing a potential AI regulation, which we're going to have more information on the 21st of April. I don't have any more information on that, so maybe we can discuss this in a future day. And of course, within the USA, we have HIPAA. And another interesting thing with the USA is the states often have their own laws. So as far as I'm aware, California also has a Consumer Privacy Act, which also needs to be taken into consideration. And I'm guessing there's probably other states within the USA where that is also the case. So if you're going to market into the USA, don't just look at the USA as a country. See if there's any state-specific laws for the areas that you want to operate in. So Go ahead, Joe. I was going to say something.
I was not.
Okay. So,
but someone
UK
has written something in the chat, and it's all good. Keep going.
Okay. So the UK MDR 2002 and the EU MDR 2017-745, or the previous EU MDD. When it comes to software as a medical device, a very, very important change occurred. So when the EU MDR came into force on the 26th of May of 2021, a significant change came in, and that was Rule 11 of the EU MDR. So previously under the old MDD, or the now current UK MDR, a lot of these software devices were class 1. As a result of the EU MDR and Rule 11, and as you can see here, so software intended to provide information which is used to take decisions with diagnosis or therapeutic purposes, which is nearly every software as a medical device or AI product on the market. These are the claims that they're making, automatically pushes that into a class 2A. So what does that now mean? Previously, under the old EU MDD or the current UK MDR, class 1 devices were self-certified. You didn't need a notified body. You were not externally audited. There was a lot less red tape involved. And also, interestingly, you did not need a full quality management system. All you needed was post-market surveillance, CAPA, product registration, and adverse event reporting. That's all you needed. But what's happened now is all of these companies that was previously class 1 and didn't necessarily need a lot of work in order to get onto the market have now had to move to the EU MDR, where they now need a full quality management system as per Article 10.9 of the MDR or ISO 13485 if they're looking for that. And now that the technical files are being audited, they're now starting to spot deficiencies in there, because if the files are audited, they don't necessarily know that the deficiencies exist. So when they're going for their MDR application, this is coming to them. And what's happening with a lot of these smaller companies, they may not have the finances or the resources to be able to be fully compliant. So some companies have withdrawn from the market as a result of that, or at the very least, remove some of the products from their portfolio due to this change. But of course, that does give the UK the strategic advantage, is that these devices continue to be class 1 here. However, the UK has decided in June 2023, they are going to propose a new regulation for the UK. What that looks like, we don't know. There's a lot of talk out there, but it seems that the UK is going to be more in line with the EU MDR. So definition and risk classification of a software as a medical device. So we have the definitions here from the EU MDR and the US FDA website of what is applicable. I've highlighted in red is what is applicable to a software. So medical device means any instrument. So again, like I said, if there's a physical element to your software, i.e. a data collection tool, that's classed as an instrument. Then we have software here to be used alone or in combination for human beings for one or more of the specific purposes: diagnosis, monitoring, and prediction, and alleviation of disease, or compensation for injury or disability. And that's generally what software is aiming to do. So it falls under the definition. We have the US FDA definition here for a medical device. But the most important thing that we need to think of medical devices is the risk classification here, because that ultimately determines what the work involved is going to be like and whether it's economically viable for you to put that onto the market and the resources that you need to allocate. So this is a table from the EU MDCG 2019-11 guidance. And it shows here, depending on the way in which your data is interpreted in your device, what classification you're going to get. So firstly, what is it doing? Is it treating? Is it diagnosing? Is it just informing somebody? Is it driving clinical decisions? And what would the impact of that be? So you can see that here, your device can be anywhere from a class 2A, a class 2B, all the way up to a class 3, depending on the claims that you make, the criticalness of the information that it's giving, and what that information actually does and how that drives clinical management effectively. So a lot comes down to this. And what I've said in the start is it's very important. And the first thing you need to do is look at the intended use and the claims that you're going to be making for your device, as ultimately that will determine what risk classification you are. So we go on to the first question: is your software even a medical device? So I've got the guidance here from the UK MHRA for standalone software guidance. So again, like I was touching on in the introduction, there's a lot of programs out there with software that monitors fitness, health, and well-being. You know, it just could be something that maybe monitors your heart rate, something gives you exercise, possibly even something that a physiotherapist would assign to you, such as stretching or something like that after a surgery. So if you look at that, that's classed as decision support software. So as long as it follows the path of a procedure or treatment, that may be something like a doctor has already decided, it's not making any additional decisions on that. It's just giving you information such as exercises. If it's just providing lifestyle treatment choices, or it's referring you to somebody like a doctor or a general practitioner, then it's generally under the class of just a software. However, If it's linked to specific medicine or devices or is considered to be an accessory, then it's going to be classed as a medical device. If it's influencing actual treatment, as in telling you what dose you should be taking, what time of the treatment you should be taking, it can possibly be a medical device. And again, if it's diagnosing anything, i.e. potentially telling you a future of risk or any injuries, anything that you may occur, then it will be classed as being a medical device, which again goes back to the start. What is your intended use and what claims are you making? As that would ultimately decide whether it's a software or it's a software as a medical device. We come here to the USA. So the USA has also released guidance on this in terms of general wellness products. So they're considered to be low risk. So this is the definition here that the CDRH has given for general wellness products, which you can read through. So claims such as preventing injuries, expediting recovery, providing specific diagnostic information will often fall under the scope of a medical device. However, claims such as increased motivation to exercise may improve quality of life, mobility, or as part of a healthy lifestyle may help with living with certain injuries or performance limitations, generally fall under the scope of a wellness product. So again, like what I touched on earlier, what is the intended use of the product and what claims are you making? That will determine whether you're a medical device or not. And if it is determined to be a medical device, what risk classification are you? So does your product have a PEMS element? So again, like I was touching on, there's a lot of software out there that has a physical element, so a programmable electrical medical system, which is often combined with the software as a means of data collection, imaging, etc. So the question you need to ask yourself, is there a physical element to your device? Is there a physical element such as a data collector that's being used in conjunction with your software? Another mistake that companies are making is they're buying these physical products from somewhere else, another company, and then claiming that it's nothing to do with them. Well, if you're buying the product and it's required to be used with your software as a medical device, even if it's from another manufacturer, you are the legal manufacturer of that product, which means that you need to be dealing with recalls. You need to be dealing with anything that wrong that goes in the field. So you need to be taking responsibility in the regulatory compliance. You can't blame it on the third-party supplier because you are buying in the product. It's your name on the label. So if anything goes wrong, you are going to be receiving the complaints for that product. So you are the legal manufacturer for that. And of course, when it comes to programmable electromechanical systems, there's additional requirements. You're going to have to do electrical and mechanical safety testing. You're going to have to do biocompatibility because it's going to be touching parts of the body. And then compliance to standards such as ISO ENI 60601-1. Also, there's going to be additional parts to your quality management system. You're now dealing with physical product. You're going to have to deal with things like recall, rework, contamination, sterilization if your product is provided in that way. That's basically something that you need to consider. So having a physical element to your software does add more work to it, and it's important that you identify that early on. So where to start with regulating your artificial intelligence as a medical device or software as a medical device? First thing I say to every single client is intended use statement. So what is an intended use statement? First of all, what is the medical indication? You know, what conditions or diseases are you looking to treat or monitor or diagnose or prevent? Patient population, are we talking about young people? Are we talking about elderly people? What weight range, what their health conditions like, you know, for example, do they have vision issues? Is there anything like that you need to consider? User groups that need to be thinking as well. So age, gender, what sort of languages are they speaking? What cultural background are they? For example, if you've got something for skin cancer detection, you know, can it deal with different skin tones? What is the professional competence of the people? Is this going to be used by doctors who are highly educated? Is this going to be used by lay users who may not have that education level? That needs to be considered. Intended environment. So where will this be used? Is it going to be used by somebody at home? Is it going to be used under the supervision of a clinician? Is it going to be used in beauty salons, even in some cases, or physical fitness centers? That's something that needs to be looked into as well. Operating principle. So how do you operate the product in order for it to maintain its intended use? What does it look like? And of course, the foreseeable misuse. That's something that you really look into. So for example, what measures have you put in place to stop untrained people using the device? Other examples of this could be something like a cryogenics product, where maybe it's applied onto the skin for too long and then it burns the skin. For example, does it have an alarm on there to prevent something like that happening? And if we look here on the right, and it's very important that you get this intended use statement there, because if you really want to write a robust clinical evaluation plan and do clinical studies, it's only if you can answer all these parts here and you know what the intended use statement is, that you know what the demographics are needed for your clinical studies. You know, what kind of use environment does it need to be into? Because that's very important when it comes to clinical data. So this is basically a flow chart of basically how it starts. So if you look at the top here, these are the first things that you need to do. So an intended use statement, general safety performance requirements if you're going for EU, preliminary benefit risk analysis, and you can see the clinical process as it goes through. You start off with literature review, eventually go into system verification, product verification. Towards the end, you go to a clinical evaluation report. But again, it goes right back to the start, which is the intended use statement. That essentially forms the backbone of the technical files, the clinical studies that you're going to be doing, how you're going to go about managing your quality management system. If you write a very good intended use statement, it will be smooth sailing from there. If you do not know what your product is, that is only going to cause problems later down the line, because you're going to have a lot of incorrect data and you're going to have technical files and a quality management system that is not truly built towards your product. So what exactly are the documentations needed? So first of all, we need to start off with a quality management system. And if you're looking for the UK, EU, or the rest of the world, ISO 13485 is the international standard for that. Or if you're looking for the USA, we are looking for 21 CFR 820. In addition to that, outside of the requirements of ISO and 21 CFR, we also need to include reporting and registration procedures for the relevant jurisdictions of which you intend to operate in. And for the EU MDR, within Article 10, we also have the quality management system requirements there, which are largely fulfilled by ISO 13485 anyway. So what kind of documentation do you need in your quality management system? Well, the areas we need to tackle are management, measurement analysis and improvement, which includes auditing, CAPA, statistical analysis. And then we also have design and development, which are design controls and clinical evaluation. Production and service control. So again, if you have a physical element to the product, how are you going about controlling the production? Data protection, that applies to all software devices as well. Installation and servicing. So companies make a mistake. They think that just because they don't have a physical product, that there is no installation or servicing involved. Well, it really depends how you deploy your software as a medical device. If you are physically going into hospitals and installing that device, then installation comes under your scope. If you're simply providing an online server or a link where no installation takes place and somebody accesses remotely, then yeah, you can argue that maybe installation is not relevant to you. Non-conforming product, again, software can be non-conforming too. It's not just physical product. Software can go wrong. You may need to have recalls on that software. You may need to put stops on there. You may need to update it, etc. And of course, customer management. We also have purchasing and outsourcing, supply management, particularly with a lot of virtual manufacturers. So software as medical device companies, there's a lot of outsourcing involved, especially when there's physical elements, like I touched on, a data collection tool that somebody else is making. It's very important that we control that outsourcing and we conduct the proper supply controls. And then, of course, we got the device marketing authorization, registration, and vet reporting. So that's post-market surveillance. Once your product is out on the market, how is it performing? Feedback, complaints, which then feeds back into your CAPA process, your statistical analysis, and your management reviews. In terms of ISO 13485, that involves a two-stage audit. So you have stage one, which is often done remotely. They basically just check to see that your documentation is in place and they're not necessarily looking for records. And stage two is also what's known as a certification audit. At stage two, they want to see that you've been using the documentation, the procedures, and they want to see physical records of that occurring. And it's at that point that you tend to get certified. Whereas compliance with 21 CFR 820 is expected. There's no certification process like this with ISO 13485. It's just something you're expected to have. And another important thing, another mistake that companies make, with the UK market, you want to use the BSEN version of ISO 13485 because that is harmonized with the UK medical device regulation. And with the EU, we want to use the EN version, which is harmonized with the EU regulation. So always make sure that you're using not just ISO 13485, once relevant for the jurisdiction of which you want to operate in. So the second part, of course, comes into your technical documentation. So technical documentation includes, but isn't limited to, so if you're in the UK or the EU, you've got the GDPR, General Data Protection Requirements. You've also got the UK MDR, the EU MDR, GSPR, General Safety Performance Requirements of the EU MDR, and of course, a 510K checklist. For clinical, we'll be comprised of things such as evaluation plans, investigational plans, evaluation reports. In terms of software, it's requirement specification, architectural, detailed design. How does that software actually work? The flow charts. How do you go about installing that software, the maintenance instruction, verification and validation? Very, very important when it comes to software. You know, verification is proving that the software is just there, but validation is, does it work within its intended use environment? And of course, the reports from that too. Risk management is a very important part as well. Product requirements and risk register. Of course, post-market surveillance, which kind of goes into the quality management system as well. But within the EU MDR, we have clinical follow-up and periodic safety update reports. And then we have the jurisdiction-specific requirements. So within the UK and the EU, when you're dealing with software, you need a data rep. You know, how are you going to manage the cybersecurity? Who's the person that's in control of that data? If you're going to operate in the UK and you're not in the EU, you need an EU rep or a UK rep. And obviously with the US, same story there, you need a US agent. Within the UK, they're no longer called notified bodies. They're now called approved bodies. So you're going to either need a UK approved body to get your UK CA marking, or an EU notified body to get your CE marking. What isn't very important to know is that there's a lot of EU notified bodies there who have MDR designation, but aren't permitted to give you UK CA yet. Those are very few. So if you're somebody out there who wants to go into the European market, but also wants to go into the UK as well, double check to see what the status is of your notified body to getting UK CA approval, as without that, they will not be able to grant it, and you will need to approach another approved body within the UK to get their UK CA mark. And of course, another requirement is the EU PRRC. So that's a person responsible for regulatory compliance. The requirements are that currently is somebody who's got suitable qualifications with 1 year's experience in quality and regulatory, or somebody that maybe doesn't hold those qualifications, but has 4 years relevant experience in quality and regulatory. Every company needs to have that. If you're a micro entity, as in a company that earns less than 100 million euros and has less than 50 employees, you can outsource that. But I really do recommend having somebody in-house for that role. Another important thing, and I'm sure this has been discussed on previous MDG calls as well, within the EU, notified bodies are experiencing a heavy backlog. They're often quoting months, in some cases I've seen over a year, prior to them being able to audit your technical documentation. So that will go on to the next slide. Is basically the question is, which market do you go to first? So it may be that the USA can get your product onto the market within a few months, but whereas with the EU, that may take over a year, and that may drive the decision as to which market you hit first. So what markets hit first? The most common question I'm asked now is, people have this perception that the USA is easier, and that may be the case in comparison to the EU. However, it really depends here. What is your product going to do, and where is it going to have the most impact, rather than which you deem it to be easier? So the top questions you need to ask yourself is, what problem is the application trying to solve? Who is the application designed for? And where are those people? Which part of the world are those people in that are going to be using that product? Number two, what demographic has your current clinical research been based on? Has it been based on somebody that fits the demographic of a US person, but then you are going into the EU where those people may not necessarily be there, and vice versa? Where is your current clinical data, and would you need to do more? And one that I mentioned is the Fitzpatrick scale, which is to do with skin tone. So like I mentioned earlier, one time I came across a product that was dealing with skin cancer. But the issue was a lot of the clinical research was done with people that had a lighter skin tone. So if they want to deploy in regions such as India or certain parts of Africa where the skin tone is darker, they do not have the clinical data to prove that the device works there. So it wouldn't make much sense for them to go to that market prior to them getting that clinical data. Number three, what are the IT infrastructure requirements? So I think that we do have some people here from the UK. If you go into the UK, we have the National Health Service, which is a free system. You would often find that many of the computers there are often 10 years older in comparison to the computers you have at home. So if you now created a software as a medical device or artificial intelligence as a medical device that is required to work on a Windows 10 system, but the hospital does not have that infrastructure, they will not be able to use your device without investing heavily into that. So that is an important factor to think of. What are the requirements of your software in terms of IT infrastructure? And does the area that you're looking to employ into have the infrastructure required to be able to run that software accordingly? So does your application actually conform to the medical device regulations and the personal data regulations of the particular region that you're looking to get into? And what class of regulation does it conform into those regions? Number five, of course, if you're a business and you're not necessarily a not-for-profit, have you done a return on investment analysis? Is it going to be economically viable for you to go into that area? Number six, now this is something that a lot of medical device companies don't consult with. It only costs a few hundred, or maybe in some cases thousands, to employ a health economist to find out for you whether it's economically viable or impact for you to employ a device on the market. If you go and do that, it's going to cost you hundreds of thousands if you do that basically without bringing a health economist in first. So what I do recommend to a lot of people is, if you're unsure which market to go into, do get a health economist in to find out if it's viable for you. And of course, number seven, what are the training requirements for the product? If this is a product that only can be used by a radiologist who's maybe got 20 years experience and is very, very specialized, how many of those people exist in the world? What particular regions of the world are they in? Will they be able to use your device? Or is it something that a lay user can use? Is it something that someone who's 18 years old has access to a smartphone and can use? Then maybe you could consider other parts of the world. So the determination of whether your software product is a medical device and its risk classification is dependent on its intended use claims and jurisdiction of the area it comes down to. The regulatory and clinical process can be very lengthy. So the earlier you start, the better off you are. Like I said, with the EU MDR, that's caused a lot of it. Another thing is there's a lot of hype out there with AI replacing the physician. But personally, what I'm seeing is that a lot of the physicians are using it as assistance tools rather than something that can replace them. It's just something to make the process more efficient. And where to market your product first is about understanding where your AI system fits in terms of clinical pathways, whatever quality to life benefits patients, what were the cost involved, is would it be economically viable, and what regions will it be most impactful? And for the UK and EU market access, what capacity does the approved and notified body have? Thank you for your time. I'll be opening the floor to any questions.
That was an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
I was actually chatting with a premium member on Slack and saying, I'm really impressed. So again, in the spirit of what I said earlier about the way you started being so good, two things just from a presentation standpoint. One, if your goal was to educate, you did. If your second goal was to let people know that if you have a question about software as a medical device, I'm a good guy to ask, you definitely did. And third, somewhat trivially, never have your last slide be thank you for your time, because that's the one we're going to look at for the longest amount of time. Put your contact information up or just cut the slide entirely so that we can see you. What would you say? Let's go ahead and have you lose the slides.
Yep, sure.
What would you say? You know, you've mentioned that you have a number of questions that you get most often. Can you give us an example of something you worked on in the last year that was especially surprising one way or the other? It went better or worse because of this or that, some regulation that changed, something that was unusual for you?
So something that I'm spotting is over the past year, I've been getting a lot with software products. So I had a potential client that was adamant that they were a software as a medical device. They had this stage 1 audit 2 weeks ago. It was only when I was trawling through some of the archive documentation, I realized they had a physical element to their device 2 weeks before the audit. So you can imagine what was going to happen. Of course, I tried the best as I can with that client, but they ended up with 18 non-conformities effectively, which didn't come as a surprise. So again, I always say to the client, start off with the intended use statement, because that tells me everything that I need to know about your product, and I can build the best quality management system and technical files as possible. If I don't know what your product is, then there's only so much I can do.
As your marketing buddy, it is the same thing for me. I start with a positioning statement that is clear and I understand your benefit and why you can support it, or we have nothing to talk about. I also have to compliment you, and I want to do it publicly. I've had 2 people now. Rick wrote, he really just dropped in to say hi and listen casually, but your thought process is intellectually addictive, and he found himself copying a much higher number of slides than he usually does.
Thank you very much, Rick.
And Sanjeev I brought on because you were in like 3 or 4 slides, and he's like, I have to get a copy of this presentation. So I wanted to bring you on, Sanjeev, and say, what was it? What is it that you're working on, and how does that relate? Why is it relevant for you, especially right now?
Sure. So I'm working on a device. Again, you know my background in point of care. And so I've been working on this, and we have a software element to it. So you're looking at cancer detection. And so it becomes, and our markets are not just the US, but Europe and India and China, et cetera, right? And so there's a component where we are taking the information and giving a scoring, right? And so it becomes very important. Our strategy to introduce it is to introduce the product by itself first, and then bring in the software part of it later. And so this would be interesting to understand, and you and I can, Karandeep, I'd love to talk to you about this as we move forward, what strategy, regulatory strategy we adopt, right? So that's why what you were talking about just made complete sense. And, you know, at Joe, if you remember at POC, I tried to do this earlier, right? And so it's, by the way, the new company is HeridiX, which is a restart of my previous company. So.
Well, don't wait until May, but you'll have a chance to meet one another in person at 10X, so that's nice.
Yeah, no, I'd actually love to talk to Karandeep even earlier because
You're
we're
both
starting to
on,
build
this
that.
is what the network is for. This is why you just start chatting with one another.
Sanjeev, I've just put my LinkedIn profile. If you connect with me on there, we can take the conversation forward. I'll be happy to help you.
Awesome. Love to do that.
Eddie asks, did Nick Anderson pay Karandeep for the health economic?
I did not know Nick Anderson was a health economist.
Yeah. That's important. Okay. This is, kind of out of my element. I will say that there was, this is probably years ago now. How long ago did I publish this? I don't even know. 5 years ago. Wow. Okay. There was a contribution in the medical devices group from a gal, and she wrote how to select a clinical evaluation report writer. I put that in the chat for folks. Basically, I just copied and pasted her stuff, so don't ask me questions. But I've had a number of people write me and say how valuable that article was. So it's related to what you were talking about, and I thought that could be valuable for folks. Like I said, I'm out of my element here, so I don't have intelligent questions to ask. If there's anyone else who has something, or they know of a project that is coming online that Karandeep can help with, by all means, share that.
So I have a question. Currently, are these regulations even applicable? Are they similar to, to the regulatory status in India and China as well, or are those very different from EU and the US?
So UK, EU, US, I'm quite comfortable with. Outside of that, I'm not too comfortable. I'm not understanding of what the China and India regulations are, but my understanding is generally around the world, the regulations don't differ much.
Yeah, my understanding was India pretty much copied the US and made that and took the EU as well. And China, actually, I found when we were doing things, they, unlike before, they became a lot more stringent. We were required to do a 900 patient study in the US, but China actually required us to do a 2,400 patient study for the same product. So I was actually surprised that they were asking a lot more than the US was.
If there are no other questions, Sanjeev, why don't you give us a quick plug about the raise that you're doing?
Sure. So we have developed a point of care CD microfluidics technology for breast cancer. You can essentially put a few drops of blood here, and you spin it in a device, and it automatically separates the blood and the plasma, and then the protein markers and the plasma get captured in these chambers out here and then get washed out. And then the software takes that and analyzes this panel and projects whether someone's got what stage cancer. And we are starting off with women's health, starting off with breast cancer, going into cervical and then ovarian. Licensed some panels from Lawrence Livermore and a couple of other places. So we had done a lot of this work earlier, and we had shown in 8 different clinical studies that we got over 85% sensitivity specificity, which is much better than mammography, as you know, which is about less than 70%. So for breast cancer. So anyway, we were at a design for manufacturing phase when the CFIUS Act kicked in and we couldn't get the money raised. So we shut down POC and restarted the company earlier this year, or early last year. And we raised about 350K. We got SOSV to come in and invest. And now we are out raising a bridge to Series A, which is about a 500K raise. And in the Series A, we are talking to some large VCs and a banker to take this and help us get the funds raised, which would be about a $25 to $30 million raise. We essentially, ultimately, our plan is to partner with Guardant and Exact Sciences and Grails, etc., to help take their product on this technology to the rural communities as well. Because right now, only less than 20% of the world's population has access to cancer diagnostics. And by the way, Joe, you had connected me to Dwayne, and Dwayne helped me by introducing me to SOSV, and that's how I was able to get the funding raised. So Dwayne, thank you for that. Really appreciate it.
Wayne, you're on. You asked a question.
Yeah, Sanjeev, who are you currently raising money from? What VCs are you talking?
Well, we've just
Go
started
to.
that. I've talked to Draper. I've talked to a couple of others, and I'm
Okay.
talking to a couple of bankers, SVB Leerink, and a couple of others who can help us raise the Series A. But our goal is to get about 500K raised quickly to get the continue until we get the Series A raised.
Yep. So if you want to just go to www.projectmedtech.com, look at the list of people we've had on the MedTech Money Series podcast. I'm happy to make introductions to anyone that you think would be a good fit, as long as it's reasonable, right? But there's some angel and early stage venture capital groups that would most likely be interested in this that I'm happy to make an intro to. Just go through and let me know. There's some groups that are probably too far down for this right now, but I'm happy to help wherever you think I can.
This is the kind of conversation that makes my heart sing. So thank you. And I'm bringing on expectant first-time dad Daniel Shepard because he and his organization at MedWorld help with strategics and raises and things of that nature. Daniel, what did you hear, if anything, that could be helpful for Sanjeev to know?
Yeah, just to
By
start.
the way, before you answer, I wrote you in Slack. I think we should have a conversation about the role of strategics at 10X. So I don't know if that's you, your dad, or Florence, but let's talk about that.
Yeah, let's have a call offline, Joe. That makes sense. Appreciate that. And Sanjeev, I think similar to Dwayne's suggestion, I mean, if you have a deck or something you can send to me. I mean, while MedWorld Advisors, our core focus is not on fundraising. Our core focus is more, as Joe mentioned, we do exit processes and strategic relationships, strategic partnerships for early stage companies that are seeking strategic partnerships. We do know a lot of people in the fundraising area, a lot of early stage and VC people. We'd be happy to share that around and make an introduction if that's helpful.
Oh, awesome. I'd love that. Thank you so much.
Like a proud father.
Hey, Joe, you're like I said, you're a gem. You remember I said that.
That's very kind. Okay, well, I think I'm gonna close with me being complimented. I think that's an appropriate place to stop. I will say that next week we're going to talk with Grady Gibbs. He helps doctors sell more products and procedures. And the week after, 2 weeks from today, is, I think it was 2015, my keynote speaker at 10X is going to join us. It's Dr. Philip Lowe, and he's the inventor of the iBrain. He's the CEO of NeuroVigil, and you can see impressive conversations with him and some guy named Elon something on his homepage. Extremely bright, I'll try to keep up, guy, and really charming. So join us then. And then on the 28th, Scott Nelson is going to join us. He, as I understand, if it goes through, he will sell his company Juve, the one that he started a few, I don't know, years ago, for $100 million. And I'm like, shit, how come I wasn't? Oh, speaking of huge successes, Jonathan Saul, the project that has been taking a good deal of his time, is on fire. He's brought to market under EUA a home use COVID test. They seem to be in demand, enough so that he was the #1 item on Amazon Health last week. And he was talking about software as a medical device, bringing it around to Karandeep's presentation. His app was #4 on all of Apple's App Store. So really interesting stuff. I suspect he's pretty solid, Karandeep, but that would be a good conversation, I think, for you to have. until then, this is Joe Hage on behalf of Joe Hage Enterprises saying, I really enjoyed this first call of the year. Karandeep, again, thank you. And stay active on the network. There's lots of connections like these to be had. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.